Hey team, I wanted to show off a little bit of my setup here for the 36 gallon. So I actually just did a water change, just did a couple of small tweaks to it. My lights actually just came back on. The way that I have those set up is I have this timer right here, which we're going to get into that a bit, but I usually shut that off for part of the afternoon just because I tend to get a lot of light through here and I like being able to see my fish during the evening. So without too much ado, I'm going to go ahead and feed these guys, just show the tank at its best, because who doesn't love a feeding frenzy? So you'll see I use these little malt trays, and this is a good mix of Daphnia, bloodworms, and baby brine shrimp, you name it. In here right now I've got a bunch of harlequin resporas, some neons, a couple of tetras, a couple of loaches, yo-yo loaches, which no one really likes apparently. I haven't had an issue with them, and a couple of different types of respora. So I actually did do a major clean out because I'm getting some new floaters, so that's why top is so bare. Anyway, so without too much more ado, here's kind of the tweaks that I've done to this. So you'll see, hey, wow, you definitely did a lot of trimming back. Look how loose that plant life looks. Well, I did trim my Amazon sword because that one was actually having a couple of issues. But what's really changed here, if you look at my pictures from earlier this week, is I no longer have a diffuser, no longer have a heater, and I don't have an intake or an output right now. In fact, I'm just using a loose pipe. The outtake is mostly because right now a lot of fish products actually come from China, and that's extremely impacted at the moment with COVID stuff. So it's going to be very hard to get a lot of piping. So here we go. All right. So CO2 is kind of a huge topic right now, at least in my feeds. So what we're running right now is this canister filter, Fluval 206. You'll see I'm using the Fluval piping. I'm going to say right now, it's great if you don't want kinks in your piping. It's terrible if you literally want to do anything with your tank. It was a hell of a time for me to actually get the atomic diffuser working. And I'll get into what that means in a minute. So in this canister filter, that does your biological filtration, which means basically pulling out your ammonia, nitrates, all the stuff that your fish don't want to have in there with them. It also does your mechanical filtration, which is what it sounds like. It's a mechanical process that pulls crap out of your water, including sometimes your baby fish. I actually found one last night while cleaning out my filter. I also pop peat moss in here because Washington's water is extremely hard. So that means that my pH tends to be a little bit high, and since I'm running a couple of species of tetra, as well as we'll be running some German ram fish, I really don't want to have too hard of water. I also use this stuff. These are basically supposed to reduce the pH of your water. It's basically called shrimp gravel. You'll see my loaches love digging around in there. They're having a great time right now stealing food. They actually get sinking pellets that I'll give them in a minute. So that's how I kind of keep a lot of my water going really well. And a canister filter has been fantastic. So what you're doing with this fish tank is essentially you are setting up standing water and trying to make it not be standing water. So the problem with a lot of those hang on back filters is that you'll have your intake with your outtake all at the same time. So they're just doing this basically, whereas you want your fish tank to be doing this. So that's why I swapped to a canister. You can see my output's right here. Nasty little pipe right there. My intake's over here. So basically it's sucking this way, outputting that way, sucking this way, outputting that way. You can see it a lot better if I just turn the valve all the way up. Well, I can see it. You might have a little bit of a harder time, but you can kind of tell. Anyway, setting that back. That's the other nice thing, is that there's a lot more control on these valves than a lot of hang on back filters have. So then getting into CO2, you'll see that I have fairly loose plants right now. I was doing droplet CO2, and then I learned, hey, that can actually burn your plants and your fish, as a matter of fact, and cause a lot of issues. So whenever you see those beautiful aquascapes, I can promise you right now, they're doing what's known as a pressure, either a two-way do-it-yourself CO2, which is basically citric acid and some other baking soda, I think it was, which is totally cool. That's what a lot of people do. Turns out great. I opted to go with the pressurized CO2 system because these tend to be a little bit more of a large investment, but they also tend to be a little bit easier to control. And for certain species of plants, they are absolutely necessary. So this is the important valve right here. This has pretty much everything. This is my output pressure here, or rather input pressure, which is coming from the canister. I assume that's the output, but it's never moved, and everything's working fine, so whatever. Comes with a solenoid. In fact, I had to fix this because it was loose and it was making a very annoying noise. And then this is what's known as your bubble counter, so I can greatly increase or decrease my CO2 if I want to. I don't have this open all the way. I was doing tank maintenance and close this. There, increase that. Wow, this is embarrassing. Come on, you. I might be actually running low on CO2. Which would make sense because I've done a lot of stupid things this past week. Anyway, we're kind of getting more bubbles now. Anyway, so CO2, that goes into your plants. Your plants are like, hey, bro, this is awesome. We can breathe. Because during the day, they take in CO2 and they output oxygen. Great. So you got two options then for getting the CO2 into your tank from that point. You can either use a diffuser, which you'll find online. That's probably a cheaper, easier to do setup, specifically if you cannot invest in a canister filter. The problem I have with those is that they don't really get infused into the water all that well. Which means that you're losing a lot of your CO2, period. Just like I probably did, because like I said, it looks like my can might actually be out. So that's why I went with what's known as an atomic diffuser, just this boy. You'll see, I'm using these until I can get clamps, because like I said, pretty much everything's sold out. This is the best way that I have at the moment in order to get my pipes nice and tight. You'll see I actually do have a little bit of a leak right here, because thank you, Fluval, your pipes are a piece of shit. And what this does is, this is my CO2 line, it goes in here. This is my output line, goes up in here, mix them together, and goes up here into the next step, which is my heater. This is an inline heater. Again, you'll see that I'm actually using, instead of clamps, I'm using these guys, electric ties, just to secure it. Like I said, temporary measure. Desperate times call for desperate measures or something like that. I got this PVC piping from Home Depot yesterday. The CO2 tubing I already had. You do not want to specifically use airtight tubing because it's going to crack and leak and be very bad. So don't use that. You can get very cheap, tons and tons of CO2 tubing that'll work even better and is designed for this stuff. So then that comes up and goes into my tank here. So this is not ideal. Like I said, I need to get a new output gauge, but I don't have much of a choice. So yeah, that's kind of the basics of your CO2 setup. Over here, you'll see I have this drip counter. This tells me that my plants don't yet have enough CO2, which is fine, because like I said, my system just kicked on. Earlier today, this was a bright green, which is exactly what I want, which means that my CO2 is probably at the right spot. It's just that right now it's a little low since, like I said, I did a water change and all that. So that's where we're at. I have these guys over here too, but what I found is that these are not terribly dependable. This guy actually told me I had high ammonia right after doing a water change. And then I've been doing pH tests because I'm adding some German rams in later. And this guy keeps telling me that I don't have a pH, which I know is wrong because my natural pH is actually close to a 7.8. So I know that it's probably around a 7.0 right now. So yeah, if you're looking into getting a CO2, the main things that you'll want is that line like I mentioned. This tank, you can either get at somewhere like Dick's does it, anywhere that does air sports. I actually go and get mine from our local welding place. They service a lot of homebrew stuff. And then, like I said, the other stuff you can get on Wish or Amazon. In fact, someone told me to get Wish. Other important thing, get bucket liners. These things are great. They're flexible, so I can pull it in and out easily. I can rinse them out. And last night, I leaked about that much water while doing this setup. So better safe than sorry. Keep some spare towels around. Anyway, yeah, I'm pretty proud of the setup, and I'm looking forward to being able to adjust it just a little bit further, specifically on these lines right here, which you'll see I've started mounting to the wall, but Yeah. I'll have to do some better mounting on that. And tomorrow, my first set of rams should be here. Looking forward to it. All right, that's it. That's a long video. Holy shit.